a little bit of new information, but not a ton. What do you think? Because
Well, I just want
it seems like there's a lot more information swirling around.
I want to complete my thought on the new signer, who I believe is worse than the old one. She scares me. Her face reminds me of when I used to do cocaine. When you can't control any of your facial muscles. She was just frightening to me. I was shocked that the president of Brown wasn't aware of these web pages. It's a Brown University website that went down. It's kind of been the story this afternoon. I don't know. I think that's kind of a big deal. But I want to return to my point that Gutfeld's law, all information can be distilled to 5% of its volume. You watch stuff like this and you realize that it's two facts that are repeated in a dozen different ways. And the repetition is maddening, but it's also incentivized because everybody wants their turn at the podium. Everybody has something they want to get out of this, whether they're a reporter or a mayor or an AG. And the medium itself demands that you inflate the story to fit the container, which is, the news.
I can't remember who said it, but it was, everything's been said, but not everybody has said it.
I think that was not Jesse Waters.
It was not Jesse Waters, but let's get Jesse Waters' take.
Okay, so we still don't know what this guy yelled. We're hearing multiple reports about him yelling something. Why can't we hear from any of these eyewitnesses? I've only heard one eyewitness say the guy had a long gun. And so he also said he looked the shooter directly in the eye, and then the shooter didn't kill him. Why didn't the shooter shoot the guy if this is a random attack? He's just spraying bullets around. Why didn't he shoot the guy he came eye to eye with? That's weird. We're also hearing interesting reports that the vice president of the Brown Republicans might have been shot multiple times. We still don't understand if this was a targeted shooting, and they're not giving us any clue about that. We also need to know, do you need to swipe a card before you get into this building? We're hearing you have to swipe cards. So is this guy a student? Did he have access to the building? Is he an international student? How many international students do they have at Brown University? It's been a very thorny issue, the issue of the Palestinian situation. There's been a lot of action, a lot of protests at Brown University. Does that concern them? Is there an international angle that they're concerned about? Still don't know about that. How about the one reporter who asks, well, we talked to a bunch of the residents and businesses that are a block away, and they say the cops never came to ask them for the Ring camera videos until this morning. So 4 days later, we're still not really flooding the zone. We're not flooding it with police. We're not flooding it with information. And the president of the university, I mean, everybody's talking about these websites being taken down.
Right.
And she has no idea. Right afterwards, in the aftermath, immediately, she had no idea what the class was. Right. How is she, the leader of the school, so unaware about the basics of this case? It's just frustrating.
It's almost as if they want to be unaware. Also, if they're asking the public to help, Harold, I don't understand why they are hiding what was reportedly yelled by the shooter, because presumably, maybe, possibly, that actually would help you figure out who it was.
Look, this was slightly better than yesterday, but not a whole lot. I'd say a couple of things. The videos, to your point, then the videos are incredibly important. Remember, it was Tyler Robinson's parents, the murderer of, I'm not gonna, I know he's on trial here, but the murderer of Charlie Kirk, who recognized his movements. He had a mask on and said that could be our son. And the father communicated with the pastor to get this young man to commit. So for the fact that they were not to admit to that it was him, the fact that there was not a walkthrough, that we did the walkthrough of the video was really amazing to me. I was surprised that nobody in the press, I listened to the last fellow in the press who was making a statement. The press, please don't make statements, just ask the questions. I would have wanted to know the trains, the buses, the airports. And we had the murder here, not just a block, 2 or 3 blocks from here at Fox of the healthcare executive by Luigi Mangione. There were all kinds of efforts by our committee. We have the best police force in the country. It took a few days to find him. Commissioner Tisch shut down the bus stations, the train stations, the airports. We knew everything. It's amazing that no one asked, have you all taken that picture right there and run AI to see within a 50-mile radius of Providence if any student looks like that with any ID? If he would have to swipe to get on campus, is there reciprocity with these universities? I just don't know what the press is asking and why they're not asking any of these questions. Where's the weapon? No
Right.
one's talked about the weapon. Do we believe he's holding the weapon there? I'm not an expert in law enforcement. You would think that those on the ground might be, and if they're not, they would bring people in that could help them analyze this kind of video, these kinds of pictures. But I do think the most important thing they did was to run that video over and over and over and over again. And hopefully someone sees this and recognizes this person as a student, as a family member, something along the lines that will be able to help bring some sort of end to this. And finally, the president of the university, who I don't know, I was surprised she didn't know the answer to the question. Everyone, it doesn't seem like there's a coordination that there should be. If he's used the phone anytime, any communication, why not the cell towers? Why aren't we finding out if there was any bounce off of anything? Because it looks like the guy was walking around the neighborhood before and afterwards. And maybe he didn't use the phone, but these are the kinds of questions I would imagine the press would be asking. I mean, I'm not a law enforcement official, but I went to law school. These are just the questions you should be asking, and I hope that at some point it helps us find this guy, because it had to be scary being in that community right now.
And during the press conference, Kennedy, the Attorney General of Rhode Island kept jumping in, and I presume it's because he thinks, like, I'm going to have to try this case, and I have to make sure that we are on the up and up on all of these things.
Well, yeah, and it seems as though he's surrounded by incompetent people who are going to do something wrong, and one of the missteps is going to compromise either the charging or the execution of the investigation, which so far has been very lackluster because on Brown, as you know, there are over 800 cameras there, which is a lot for any university, and all of the footage that they provided is from ring cams, from Nest cams, from residences around the school. So they're not giving us anything from within the school, which is very, very well surveilled. So that's incredibly unusual. But in terms of the particulars, if there was a student who was targeted during this class, would it have been known who was going to be there? It sounded like it was more of an informal study group,
right,
and not the regular time for the class to be meeting, because, we've all been through finals. That you cram stuff in as much as possible right before finals week, and it felt like that's what this was. So how would the shooter have known who was inside the classroom unless they had some sort of intimate information about a person that they were targeting? And they were very quick on Sunday night to release the identity of, this person of interest. And, they didn't have a problem there. And they said that they were using geolocation. That's what Kash Patel had been talking about. So if you did, in fact, have someone who was clearly casing and you knew the time and you knew the exact place, then why can't you triangulate that? It just goes to show that there are a number of elements that other investigations have had, and they've had more successful, quicker outcomes than what we're seeing here. And that's what is leading to the anxiety. And I don't think it's particularly helpful that the president of the university is talking about everyone's feelings when you still have victims who are in hospital beds in critical condition. And you've got two students who have been murdered, and we're talking about practice? You're talking about people's feelings? I think that they absolutely need to shore up some ends here and maybe get other people in there to talk to the press, because they're not doing a great job of instilling confidence.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.